For any sane person, being compared to Jack Doherty is a fate worse than accidentally defecating in public, or even worse than getting cancelled by the entire internet. But for this looks-maxing kick streamer, that seems to be the goal. After all, now that Jack is fading into obscurity, someone has to take his mantle, and Clavicular looks like he's up for the challenge. He's gone from mocking people's physical appearances.
Her mid-face is way too long. Obviously, she's got the jowls coming in, horrible nasolabial folds, horrible total facial width to height ratio, just really bad age indicators, but obviously at 30, that's not something really that's gonna surprise me.
To harassing women in public during his IRL streams.
What's with the pants, bro?
Oh wait, you should do the Jester Max dance in the fucking store.
All right, check this out, All
right, bet. Wait, go pop. Wait, Wando, don't run. Dude, this is movie quality.
Oh my god. Oh, let's fucking go, bro.
And openly trying to persuade others to abuse drugs.
And I would say the trend is quite positive, and most of the copes that you read on the internet and like Reddit r/steroids are just completely wrong, right? So it's like Trend has a reputation for being extremely unhair safe, extremely bad for your organs, and some of the stuff is just either blown out of proportion or just comically wrong, right?
The question is, will he actually reach the level of infamy Jack Doherty once enjoyed, or will his degenerate habits force him into an early retirement? Hi, I'm the Internet Anarchist. I create weekly YouTube documentaries, and today we'll be diving into the controversial and sudden rise of looks-maxing influencer Clavicular, how his rise to fame was fueled by unfiltered disrespect and some of the most extreme views on physical appearance, why he's currently considered one of the most polarizing influencers across the internet, and how he could potentially be even worse than Jack Doherty because of the dangerous practices he's been recommending to his young male audience. That said, the only thing I recommend is for you to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new banger videos. So hit that subscribe button and let's jump straight into the video. While Clavicular, or Clav, might be one of the more controversial influencers online today, his early content was surprisingly harmless. Born on December 17th, 2005, the then 16-year-old first appeared on TikTok in October 2021, and like many others his age, his content was just him performing trending TikTok dances. However, something about his appearance, which didn't quite line up with his age, made him stand out among the sea of broccoli haircuts, a distinction that planted the earliest seeds for what his entire brand would eventually become, because over the next couple of years, Clav's content shifted dramatically. He moved away from the TikTok dances and into a far more concerning territory, looks-maxing. If you're not familiar with the term, looks-maxing is essentially about doing anything possible to increase one's physical attractiveness. This includes soft-maxing, non-invasive practices like moisturizing, getting a haircut, or hitting the gym, and hard-maxing, which takes things to a much more extreme level, involving risky cosmetic surgeries, such as limb lengthening procedures. And Clav was all in from the get-go. He leaned heavily into the reckless side of this culture and began sharing the flat-out dangerous enhancements he'd already done to his own body in hopes of becoming a life coach for his viewers. He'd talk about the insane reason he started injecting himself with testosterone when he was just 14 years old.
Was there a specific moment that you remember where you were like, yeah, I'm just gonna hop on testosterone, like when you're 14?
Just really taking a look at what was possible and in terms of time frame. I wanted to get to my goals as quickly as possible, right? Because I always thought the idea of telling people you work out and talking about all this stuff, but you're not big, to be just kind of ridiculous. It's like, dude, what are you actually getting after? So I was like, I'm gonna get my physique going as quickly as possible. I do not care about side effects. I don't care about any implications of oh, this guy's using drugs. Like, none of that shit really fazed me.
To add to that, he has also admitted to using bone smashing techniques during his teen years, a practice where people intentionally create microfractures in their facial bones using a hammer, hoping to develop a sharper jawline.
I'm trying to do with bone smashing, what my goal of it is to simulate more zygomatic prominence, right? So more projection. So what I do is I use the swelling to my advantage. So I'll bone smash, and then I will cover up the inflammation with makeup. That way, people perceive my zygos as being a lot bigger from the bone, but not the swelling itself. So that's how I use it and make it dope.
The logic behind this is based on Wolff's Law, which states that bones adapt to the stress placed on them, which some bone smashers interpret as meaning bones grow back stronger once healed. But according to certified medical professionals, none of this is backed by science. And in extreme cases, it can even lead to airway obstruction, suffocation, and blindness. Even aside from the medical risks, doing this at such a young age could have long-term consequences, and it's likely he'll start feeling the effects by the time he reaches his late 20s. But the way Clav tells it, all of these borderline self-harm behaviors were necessary because of how awkward he looked in his early teen years. Between 2023 and 2024, Clav also branched out to YouTube. Some videos covered his own self-proclaimed ascension as a looks maxer, while others pushed questionable advice on how his viewers could try following in his footsteps.
And I would say the trend is quite positive, and most of the copes that you read on the internet and like Reddit r/steroids are just completely wrong, right? So it's like Tren has a reputation for being extremely unhair safe, extremely bad for your organs, and some of the stuff is just either blown out of proportion or just comically wrong, right?
During this period, he also frequently collaborated with other looks maxing coaches, often to criticize soft maxing and push his audience towards the far more extreme hard maxing route, which included videos like Looks Maxing Lies Exposed featuring Clavicular, where he rattled off niche scientific terms to dismiss any so-called hoaxes surrounding looks maxing.
There's just no real way to replicate distraction osteogenesis with your f***ing thumbs. That's an absurd thing to claim. It needs to be done with a traditional orthodontic appliance.
This enabled him to create an aura of objectivity and legitimacy around himself, and once he'd built that identity, he took things even further, in a way he still gets criticized for today. He launched his own paid online course called the Clavicular System, where he claims to offer personalized one-on-one coaching using a data-driven framework designed to help his followers surpass their quote genetic potential. Alongside this course, he launched a school community called Clavicular's Clan, which followers can join for $49 a month. Inside this community, Clav promises 100 plus advanced courses on looks maxing, nootropics, pharmacology, social dominance, and weekly Zoom calls, all marketed as a tool to help his followers ascend to their body's limits, just like he claims he did. And as worrying as that sounds, it gets worse, because the community already has 1,400 members, all of whom have signed on to take advice from a teenager with no formal training, no credentials, and no real understanding of the risks involved. Yet, despite that, he's already built an intense level of devotion among his young male fanbase. You can see it all over his Reddit community, where posts like this are common. Since no one else is going to say it, I will. Clav is the new poster boy for Sigma males to look up to. He's the embodiment of a Sigma and everything they believe in, and he's only going to get bigger as time goes on. It's time to acknowledge his success. By the end of 2024, Clav had generated a substantial amount of influence among the looks maxing community, which only skyrocketed after he made his breakout streaming debut in 2025. It happened on November 10th, when Clav randomly collaborated with Adin Ross on Kick. The stream itself was fairly standard. The two connected over Discord, played some games, and discussed each other's content. But for Clav, the exposure was massive. He was suddenly in front of a brand new audience, many of them within the exact age range his content speaks to. As a result, his popularity exploded practically overnight, which set the stage for his true breakout moment a few days later, an IRL stream with the controversy magnate himself, Jack Doherty. At first, everything between the two of them seemed oddly calm, but it didn't stay that way for long. Soon, the stream devolved into a cringy confrontation.
Alright, Bart. You. Hey, why? You think your girlfriend's more than her? No. Why? Definitely not. No, his girlfriend's in college, bro. She's getting nice. She's getting. Adin Ross is in there right now. I'm joking.
You are kind of kid the way you.
But you said though.
I do think that they're.
Like I gotta stick up for them too, you know. They're my friends, you know.
He thought that Paris was stupid.
Oh, were we recording the whole time? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect your girlfriend. You disrespected the girls, bro. It's fair game, bro. It's like. You can't disrespect like the girls I'm with and then not expect to get the girls you're with get disrespected as well.
But while that wasn't particularly shocking, since chaos is basically Jack's brand, what did catch viewers off guard was the fact that despite being one of the most hated people online, Jack wasn't the one in the wrong here.
The reason I never responded to any of the podcast stuff or anything was because like literally like the very next post they did was an OF promo. I've actually never gone through I was in a relationship for like over 2 years. I never went through her phone once.
This is what you do. This is what you do. You just ask to do it, and if she hands it over, you don't even have to look.
But I never even asked to do it. Actually, I think one time I did. Because my chat was like saying like, oh, she DM'd someone. And like, I wanted to see if she did, but she didn't.
Things escalated to a point where Clav just got up and left the stream.
I wish things could have went a little better.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, bro, I never like meant to come off like that. Like,
I'd be
like, I know you didn't mean to come off like that either to the girls. You know, it's just like it's content at the end of the day. We can't sit there and be boring and just chat about like what colors the sky or whatever the fuck. You know, it's like.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'd be willing to try it out another day, but it's not good.
So you'll be fine, man.
I'll be in touch with you. Have a good time.
Right.
Take care of yourself.
You have a blessed day, man.
And for what was probably the first time in his entire career, social media overwhelmingly sided with Jack, with comments like, "I'm actually surprised Jack wasn't in the wrong here," and "Bro talks crazy to other people, then when the energy is returned to him, he's hurt." But despite the hit to his reputation, this controversy, along with the exposure to Jack's much larger audience, ended up boosting Clav's streaming career tremendously. From there, his rise was incredibly fast, because just 2 weeks into his streaming career, Clav started hitting a couple of major milestones, the kind that would take most creators years to achieve. One of the biggest of these was when he broke Kick's platform record for the most donations in a single stream, claiming he pulled in $35,000 from viewers in one night. But what shocked people the most was when he showed off the $50,000 he'd earned after just his first week of streaming on Kick. During that same stretch, his combined following across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter also shot past 500,000. And unfortunately for everyone who's already found him unbearable, Clav only got bigger from there. He even dipped into a controversial side of IRL streaming he clearly picked up from someone he claims he doesn't like, but more on that later. For now, we need to talk about a different controversy, one that didn't just amplify his reach, but also cranked up the intensity of his already explosive commentary towards women. This took place on November 20th, when Clav appeared on the Fresh and Fit podcast, the same manosphere pair known for bringing on panels of female OF models just to debate them on why they deserve less. During this episode, one of the hosts, Myron Gaines, handed the reins directly to Clav, asking him to rate and critique the women at the table using his obnoxious pseudoscientific breakdowns. And Clav didn't hesitate for a second, resulting in a viral clip of him tearing into the model's appearances.
So she got 3.5. Why and how can she improve?
Well, her mid face is way too long. Obviously, she's got the jowls coming in, horrible nasolabial folds. Horrible total facial width to height ratio. Just really bad age indicators, but obviously at 30, that's not something really that's going to surprise me. Her upper maxilla is super recessed, horrible infraorbitals. That's why your under eyes are coming in like hell. Really recessed chin. All the facial convexities are wrong. Her radix is recessed. Moving on. Okay, well, how much time do we have on the podcast?
And while he did get some applause from the podcast's viewers, who felt that he put the women in their place, there were plenty of others who weren't buying into the idea that Clav magically became an authority just because he uses complicated scientific language. Some even labeled him the Gen Z Patrick Bateman, while others pointed out the absurdity of his behavior. It's funny how this kid is 19 years old, and yet everyone around him treats him like an authority/big brother figure because the steroids aged him so much. But that wasn't the end of Clav's involvement with Fresh and Fit. Just a few days later, he returned to debate Myron on why looks matter more than money or status in dating, delivering arguments that revealed just how immature his worldview really is.
But the other thing I'll say is, even if you do triple your income, which is, going to be unrealistic for most people from 25 to 35, tripling your income is not going to offset that disparity in terms of how far you've digressed in your looks, right? Because say you make $100,000 at 25 and you're at the peak of your looks, and then you start making $300,000 with all the decline in age, at 35 you're right? So that's why waiting that long is going to be at serious detriment to most people. Not like literally 99% of people will not in 10 years be able to overcome they're aging with, status and money. That's just not a realistic thing.
One comment perfectly summed up the issue with Clav's reasoning. It's like they can use logic and articulate themselves well, but somehow still come to the wrong conclusions in my opinion. Keep in mind, these guys are talking about the general population and using dating app statistics. If you want to avoid these issues, you need to look in the right environments. They treat like a way to level up and ascend when you're actually doing the opposite by trying to get 50 bodies before marriage. This ideology is just absurd, and I will never understand it. However, the moment that made the most noise around Clav's so-called objective rating system was when he rated Michael B. Jordan a 3.5 out of 10.
Facially, we're talking about the face. What would you rate Michael B. Jordan? Because you know, let me tell you something. A lot of girls I know, they really like Michael B. Jordan for whatever reason.
I can tell you the reason. It's the fact that he's rich and famous, right? In terms of facial aesthetics, he's far below average. I would say that he's about 4 out of 10, maybe 3.5.
Wow.
Super facially challenged, very aesthetically disfortunate. So Michael B. Jordan is not a mogger and not good looking at all.
This sparked a huge wave of conversations about whether Clav genuinely believes his pseudoscientific explanations, or if he was just rage baiting for clout, with one comment summing up exactly why people were starting to have doubts about his system, but he rated Neon a 5. Because Neon getting a higher rating wasn't some random occurrence. Clav had to become close with the Kick streamer, going live with him regularly throughout mid-November.
So I'm an incel?
You were, but now you ascended.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not anymore though, right?
Yeah, no, you're not anymore. Did you just see? You got a bunch of numbers and shit. You literally look like 2 points better already.
So I'm a 5 out of 10 now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Easy 5 out of 10. You guys see that ascension? That's crazy.
Even in those streams, Clav found ways to redirect attention towards himself through more face rating breakdowns, clips that quickly went viral.
How many surgeries do you think I had?
I don't think that's a surgery, but I know you had lip filler. I know you have Botox.
Okay, yeah, I have lip filler and Botox, okay.
And it looks like you might have had, you had filler in your cheeks too. And it's migrating down your face.
Realizing how much these collaborations were fueling his rise, Clav kept going, appearing in even more streams throughout November, including multiple sessions with Adin Ross and several IRL streamers with UK influencer Ed Matthews, who he also befriended. But while his popularity kept climbing, viewers also began seeing more and more red flags, starting with his alarming drug abuse problem. The first real sign of trouble came during a stream with Adin Ross, where Clav casually recommended Ozempic for weight loss, even claiming it would increase Aiden's lifespan.
Yeah, but dude, why don't you just get on Ozempic? It makes no sense. Why are you trying to do so much hard work?
Wait, so you're saying I should get on Ozempic?
Yeah, bro, why? Take the fucking easy way out. People are like, such and they're like, oh, dude, it's the hard work that matters.
People go blind though.
No, that's I'm pretty sure 3 people. That's really powerful and it's way safer. It'll actually increase your lifespan.
He also openly promoted TRT and anabolic steroids as completely harmless, dismissing decades of medical concerns as nothing more than fear-mongering.
I haven't heard any good objective arguments as to why, testosterone isn't ideal for people. It seems like a lot of misinformation and a lot of the guys who do the carnivore natural promotion of that lifestyle, it's all a red pill stupid f***ing grift to look cool and masculine, but it's not. It's just retarded. It's anti-science.
Yeah.
You're living in the past if you're not on steroids, in my opinion.
So people that don't take steroids, you're saying are living in the past?
Absolutely, yeah.
However, what truly alarmed viewers was Adin confirming, live on stream, Clav's extreme drug habits, calling it something he'd never seen before.
Now, I will tell you guys the real truth. I don't know if I'm being a fucking snitch. I've never seen someone snort ever in real life. I literally witnessed Clav snort. Literally. Witnessed it. And I didn't know how to feel. I did not know how to feel. I've never seen that ever.
Since then, Clav has publicly admitted to using methamphetamines as a pre-workout stimulant and appetite suppressant. And as if that wasn't enough, he's also openly talked about taking various other substances as part of his beauty routine.
What
drugs do you take in a day?
I'm taking testosterone every single day. I take minoxidil for my hair. I take dutasteride for my hair. I take 7.5 milligrams of Accutane a day. I use crystal meth as a stimulant and Tolene Max. It's much more mild than Adderall, actually, and I'm pretty much using meth for hollow cheeks.
He's even admitted to sniffing creatine to get through streams.
I like for streaming, I like CNS stimulants. Like I like it's probably the best. But for actually doing like task-oriented things on a computer, it's a little bit different. So there's not a lot of times where I'm actually ripping like to stream. I would say that's usually me on.
On top of all of this, he's also alluded to injecting himself 3 times a day with a tanning peptide called NC2, plus testosterone, human growth hormone, and an entire list of peptides.
Jack, you should start taking.
It gets you really tan.
It's like a supplement.
A pep.
It's just like a tan?
Yeah.
Bro, that's crazy. No way you do that.
Yeah.
Just go to like a tanning street. Even that's okay, going to a tanning booth. Just like step outside.
Well, that gives you cancer, bro.
The sun?
Yeah.
So what does those needles give you? Like hepatitis?
No, nothing like that. Not if you're sanitary with it.
But I was saying, like, you gotta inject yourself with.
Probably like 3 per day.
Wow, like what?
Testosterone.
Oh, I used to take HGH.
However, despite the obvious dangers of injecting himself with so many potentially dangerous compounds, Clav claims to have 0 regrets about it.
If you could go back in time, would you still take test at 14 years old?
Absolutely, yeah. So everything I did, no regrets, right? So I'm 100% confident that I made the right decision in my life. And I'm so glad that I look a little bit more mature, than I actually am in terms of my age. Because it's helped me a lot. We could talk about, some of the jobs that I've worked and the respect that I've gained from just having a little bit more presence in my life from, some of the pharmaceuticals I've taken. Literally the best thing that anyone could do.
In his warped perspective, pharmaceutical drugs are the future, and there's no reason not to take them. But as concerning as the drug use already is, Clav hasn't stopped doubling down, because he recently also revealed to the list of risky cosmetic surgeries he plans to get in December to increase his presence, which includes a double jaw surgery costing $35,000.
Clav, why are you getting a double jaw surgery?
I am getting a double jaw surgery due to the fact that I know the amount of money that I'm investing will pay itself off to a huge degree, right? So it's $35,000 for a double jaw surgery and with full facial implants. And I decided upon this before I did social media.
And a leg lengthening surgery to increase his height.
Call yourself very reasonable about what's accomplishable. Why are you spending $100,000 on surgery to go from 6'2" to 6'6"?
That is more about just presence, right? I've always valued presence super, super highly, right? You walk into a room, people notice, right? You're standing in the middle of a club, you're an outlier, right? That to me, just because people will come up to me, they'll say, oh, well, 6'2", that's already very tall. But in terms of percentiles, it's only 91st percentile, right? 6'6", we get to 99.
And while those comments alone sparked plenty of debate, one moment managed to unite almost his entire fan base against him. It happened during a stream on November 22, when Clav injected his at the time 17-year-old girlfriend with cosmetic peptides live on camera.
Here in Tel Aviv, if you ever want to party.
Dude, I can already see a clips. Clav injects meth on a... Think they're going crazy.
Chat, we're looks maxing her. It's all good. Dr. Clav?
He described the injection as a fat-reducing compound meant to contour her cheeks, but all viewers saw was a grown adult performing an illegal, untrained medical procedure on a minor. As you might imagine, the outrage was instant and intense, with many even calling for Clav to be jailed for this. Yeah, this is illegal practice of medicine on a minor. He'll likely be charged once police become aware and take action. But what disturbed people even more was how clearly influenced and impressionable his young underage girlfriend seemed. This was proven further when the internet uncovered another worrying clip, where Clav tries to convince her to drop out of college to prove she's the one for him.
If you want me to take you seriously, you would have to drop school and, I'll take care of you.
I'm gonna drop out of college.
If you want me to take you seriously.
I mean, I don't know.
If you want to be the one, if you want me to actually take care of you and all that kind of stuff, you gotta drop school,
And if that wasn't enough to make people question his authority, his IRL behavior definitely pushes things over the edge. It all started with a heated encounter near the end of November, when a stream sniper tracked him down during a IRL broadcast. Instead of brushing it off, Clav ended up hurling homophobic slurs at him while threatening to break his face.
What? I'm not stream sniping. You're not stream sniping?
Oh God, we just seen you.
Okay.
Oh God, I live here.
On God, you're the biggest fat ever. And the only reason that, you know, I wouldn't slap the shit out of you is because I actually have things for you to take. Okay? I have assets for you to sue me for.
Wait, did he ask for lip smokes?
No. He didn't ask for it. But if I didn't have any assets for you to sue me for, I'd break that jaw in half, I'm telling you right now.
The stream sniper then challenged him to a boxing match at brand risk, a challenge Clav immediately refused while continuing to throw threats his way.
I just told you.
Go on brand risk.
Go on brand risk. I will break your mandible in half.
Let's do it.
No, I don't even.
Let's do it.
I will break your mandible in half. But I actually have assets for you to steal.
Bro, you're made of plastic. Let's do it.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
Get the fuck out of my face right now.
Brand risk.
The fuck out of my face. Brand risk? Are you fucking insane? Who even are you? You're a nobody. Okay, so keep doing your videos, but.
The clips of this incident split the audience into two camps. Some criticized the stream sniper for clout chasing, while others condemned Clav for the slurs and threats, pointing out that someone who positions himself as a life coach should probably act like one. And that's the core issue. Clav is only 19. He's not a role model. He's a teenager pretending to lead other teenagers. It's basically the blind leading the blind. It also doesn't help that more clips surfaced showing him using racial slurs.
We're gonna go a cappella.
Just give me an excuse to say, you know?
He and his friends have repeatedly been caught harassing random women during IRL streams.
Check this out.
Alright, bet. Wait, go follow. Wait, Wando, don't run. Dude, this is movie quality.
Oh my God. Oh. Let's fucking go, bro. We're viral as fuck. Oh my God.
That's crazy.
Oh shit. Is that bad?
Yeah, you cannot do that.
Okay, fuck that.
Behavior that looks almost identical to Jack Doherty's, and might even result in the same kind of real-world consequences. Yet Clav seems unfazed. In fact, he may have taken things even further, because on December 3rd, while partying on a yacht with influencer Ed Matthews, Ed might have just exposed Clav for secretly running an OF agency.
It's on stream. However, we got some non-OnlyFans things right now. Clav's trying to recruit him, but I mean, bro, I've been there. When I was 19, I was doing OnlyFans management. And you know what? I just thought I'd only ever get a team that's actually on it, because the things that don't do it, they fuck up their fucking shit.
Although he didn't confirm it, you can see from his reaction that there's probably some truth to what Ed is saying. Unsurprisingly, this came off as massively hypocritical, especially since Clav had spent a full Fresh and Fit episode lecturing and mocking the exact type of women. One comment even dragged Myron Gaines into it, stating, "Myron Gaines, pretty sad your boy Clavicular is an OF pimp. Bring the truth out of people, and your boy Clav definitely looks uncomfortable when Ed is exposing how he really makes his money," while another comment seemingly confirmed the allegation even further, by stating, "He's banning anyone in chat bringing it up, lol, tells you everything you need to know." For now, it seems like Clav is still living his best life, at least on the surface. In the month of November itself, Clav managed to gain over 49,000 followers on Kick, while his Instagram follow account surged to over 100,000, and his TikTok is past the 500,000 mark, which is worrying, because the more influence he gains, the more young viewers will feel encouraged to copy these dangerous habits, not realizing that he either has no understanding on the long-term consequences of his own actions, or knows everything and is just pushing it all under the rug to sell more courses. That said, Clav's eventual downfall seems like an inevitability at this point, because as of making this video, Clav has also started regularly collaborating with Sneeko, which has resulted in some even more concerning moments, including one of him taking what looks to be nose creatine live on stream and immediately becoming erratic. he still has a chance to turn things around if he starts making some smarter choices. But given everything we've seen so far, that doesn't seem likely at this point. Before you close off this video, please take a moment to watch today's sponsored message. FlexiSpot didn't want to interrupt today's video, so they suggested we place the sponsorship segment at the end. After genuinely using their E7 standing desk for a few weeks, I've found it has greatly improved my work experience. So I truly want to recommend their product to anyone who spends hours at their desk, because if you spend long hours at your desk like I do, you know how quickly a bad setup catches up to you. My old desk wobbled, locked me into one position all day, and after a few hours, my back definitely felt it. That's why I switched to the FlexiSpot E7 standing desk. I actually installed this myself, and now it's part of my main working setup. One of my favorite features is the programmable height presets, allowing you to go from sitting to standing in a matter of seconds, helping you stay moving throughout the day. Unlike cheaper desks, which are built with flimsy aluminum, the E7 is built with automotive grade steel with thickened legs. It's seriously solid, even at standing height. Typing, pushing, leaning on it, there's basically no wobble at all. It also supports up to 355 pounds, so you can load it up without worrying. On top of that, FlexiSpot offers a 15-year warranty and free returns within 30 days, making this desk an extremely low-risk upgrade to your setup. If you're watching this soon after I've uploaded, FlexiSpot are offering New Year's sales with up to 65% off, and customers have a chance to win a free offer. At checkout, you can also use code YTE730 for $30 off your order. With that being said, thank you to FlexiSpot for supporting the channel.